Yes.
They don't get
It
out.
doesn't help that we ran a little bit late too. So it is 6:37. I'll call the work session of the mayor and council for the city of Snellville, Georgia for Monday, October 26, 2020 to order. First, we'll run through the regular business meeting. Need someone for the invocation? Anyone want to?
Not my turn.
Christy stood up.
Yeah, I agree.
Kelly, would you do it?
Okay.
Okay.
The short version.
No.
The short version.
5 minutes. Time run.
And then we'll have the flag, the pledge, Solange.
If it were up to him to manage stuff, it would be simple.
We'll be swearing in Carrie Hetherington. Got the minutes to approve. There was one adjustment to the minutes that were in the packet, and that was for the bonds. The minutes said $2 million instead of $20 million, so that's been adjusted.
Been
and
corrected.
the ones I've got here are correct.
Sorry, I didn't pick up on that. I was reading something else.
I got your back there, Todd.
I bet it was a real page turner.
We have no invited guests and no committee reports. We'll have the approval of the agenda. The public hearing will have the UDO. Questions, comments?
I just wanted to say that we got all the loose ends tied up this morning. So the code that you want to reference as part of the adoption is going to be labeled V3 or version 3, dated 10/26/2020. And that'll be the official code that we adopt along with that resolution that you have in front of you. And that's basically it on that front. I think we went through this pretty comprehensively and as many kinks as we can. And now it's time to implement it and put it to work.
Okay, so the motion will need to say adoption of the Unified Development Ordinance V3 dated
I
10/26.
think the ordinance is attached, so just make sure that when you, as part of the passing of the ordinance, that you reference this version, because this is the most recent version. At the time, we were working, off another version, so we just need to make sure that it's referenced when you adopt the ordinance, that you just reference this version of the code, and we'll be good to go.
Okay.
If my colleagues allow me to do so, I think I can handle that.
Okay.
Which version are you going to bring up?
The first one.
The first one.
You get the first one.
The one he read yesterday, he understands that
It
one.
was a page turner.
I bet it was.
Okay, then we have item B, which is Resolution 2020-16 for the Table 2, future land use categories and zoning districts.
And what that's basically just to align the new zoning districts, the renamed districts with the land use categories from the comprehensive plan, so it all works together. I'll basically just show a table of the changes, it brings it all in together, and pretty simple. And then item C there is just the adoption of the map, which officially the biggest changes there are going to be the name changes of our residential districts existing, no substantial changes to their size or configuration, the expansion of the town center overlay, and then the combination of the RS, or what we call RHOP now, to RO, and the combination or transformation of any BN lots to BG. And those are the major changes. They'll be shown on a small map in your package, and I have a big map for you to sign per the code. Now we have to adopt it once we're done in the clerk as well.
Okay. Okay, any questions?
Since our clerk is out,
Butch?
which signs it? Okay. Just
Yeah,
want to make
that's
sure we're able to.
I
read that.
just put city clerk at the bottom, no names, so whoever wants to put a pen on it. We haven't had an official adoption in over 10 years, so it's good to get something that's, concrete, and that official adoption date certifies.
Yeah, I just don't want anything hanging out there. Because our moratorium ends tonight.
Correct.
All right, so we have nothing on the consent agenda, no old business. Under new business, we've got the planning and development fee schedule. Does anybody have any other questions or comments on that? Okay, then we'll have the 7th amendment to the master development agreement.
And hopefully the last.
That's what we said last time. And the time before.
Well, 7's a lucky number, though, so this is it.
And that takes us to November 16th of 2020.
So when we do new business review and approval of amendment, do we need to say version 7? Or do a date?
7th and then.
Do the date to November 16th.
16th.
The resolution.
November 16th,
Yep.
2020, right?
2020.
I can't carry
Yeah.
it tonight, so someone else do that.
Motion to approve the 110th amendment.
Until 2020.
The 100th.
Or 21 or 22.
Okay, so that's our regular meeting, so we'll go back to the work session agenda. Any correspondence, Butch?
No, not this time.
City Attorney's report?
I do. I have this is sort of in anticipation of the busyness of this group over the next few months. That you'll be getting a lot of documents and then a lot of bond documents for approval. So you're going to be very busy, and so the sort of getting ahead of one factor is that there is a request for part of the bond issue to be cobblestone improvements, capital expenditures. I think there's some modifications that have to do with ADA requirements and that sort of thing. So first thing we needed was some precise budgets for that construction process so that we could incorporate it into because the bond council has to test that to determine if it's something we can do bonds for. The range of money is around, the round number thrown out is $1 million. So we are suddenly increasing our amount of cash resources going into the DDA. So my encouragement was now to, and inside of the DDA request is some staffing functions that would be I think an executive director sort of operate there. So your volunteer DDA is becoming very complex. So, and you put $1 million in there, it's just coming up with like the spending controls and procurement ordinance that you guys have in your operating system as we put that big lump sum in there. Now y'all have made dramatic improvements over while this has been happening. Once Cobblestone happened, you've hired an accountant that does financial reports, which is really good. What I'm talking about is probably upfront controls that talk about spending authority and procurement and that sort of thing, so that the accountant has something to test the financial parts to it. So it's those two things are really what I was trying to put on the table to get us started, so that we can get it done and to the bond lawyers, so they can be comfortable, and they'll have to do follow-up reports on the financial aspects of things. And so it would already be in place, so that you know, they could look at one place and know that they could certify the spending of the bond proceeds too.
How soon will that paperwork for the operational agreement for the DDA, or the operating agreement, how soon will that be?
We'll get with Blake tomorrow if y'all say that's what you want to see happen.
Yep.
And on that note, with down here, what needs to be the maximum that an executive director can approve an expenditure for that council feels comfortable with? Because we have that chain around our city manager, and since we're the financial be-all, end-all backstop for the DDA, we have to be in agreement on that, don't we?
Well, I mean, it's always important for the DDA to get along with the council.
Right.
When it comes to money.
But if we can streamline the process
Then they don't have to come back and ask it.
Right.
Once you set the standard, it's set. That's a great thing for their operational benefit
Right.
too.
$2,000, $5,000, $10,000?
I don't know, we'll have to talk about that, it all depends on, and I was gonna ask the question, if I can, about hard numbers, for what we're looking to do at Cobblestone, you need something hard coming to you, and what we want to do, and we can kind of put those numbers out. We've added some new things, we're gonna meet with landscape people to try to do some stuff to add into the overall beautification of the project, to make it kind of flow with what's coming, right? So, and we're pulling all that together as fast as we can, so.
It doesn't have to be the bid numbers, but it would really be good if we had experts
Okay.
who gave us the range that's upper range, so that we
That's what we're
can,
looking at right now.
yeah. And maybe even enough capital projects that meet Blake's criteria that go beyond what we expect. So that we don't have to come, so we don't have a excess. We don't need an excess. We need a plan that sort of goes beyond.
Right.
And
And then we're already talking about internal pieces there to make sure that those expenditures are bid out properly and competitively done and things like that. So I know you're probably going to want to see all that kind of thing from the EDA also.
that's perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what that subject was. Yep. Okay.
Was the parking, was that going to be part of the work session agenda, or is that in exec session?
I think it's exec session. You mean all of the agreements?
The map?
No, not all of the agreements, but we've got it as item B, site plan declaration exhibit, and that was the surface street parking.
I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about that here.
Okay.
The negotiation part of it probably needs to be exec session.
Okay.
But
Well, we'll go on to the projects, and then we'll come to that one.
Okay.
Okay.
As I said in my cover letter on the town center update the other day, so much of it occurred in last Monday's meeting, and then you'll have a lot of time for input in executive session and going forward. Just a few notes from the update. I think we still need to hold open the date for the potential called meeting next week. We have a lot of documents to discuss, and we'll just hold that date if that's okay for everybody.
That was November 6th.
November the 5th. It's 6
Or
p.m.
5th, that's,
You'll be back on the 5th, I
we
think.
get back Thursday, that's Thursday, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we get back Thursday.
Okay. And Solange, I think that covers you. I think it was last week that you had the conflict.
Is that Wednesday or that's Thursday?
It's a Thursday.
It's Thursday.
Thursday.
So you're going to make me miss my steak dinner for graduation from Snellville Citizens Police Academy. That's all right. I know you're good for it. I know you're good for it. It's okay.
I'll take care. I'll even get you a cookie after.
What time does that mean?
6 o'clock. Thursday, November 5th. I just have a feeling we're going to need it. As we talked about, the 7th extension is on the agenda tonight. Gets us through November the 16th. The other documents will be an executive session discussion. There's one item I'm going to add on here, and that is the business center negotiations with Ramon and Thrive. We haven't really talked about that as much. There have been a couple of good meetings, and we can share everything with the rest of the council there. Everything else is pretty much waiting on documents. We're moving forward. The best news is the post office. They still, I mean, if you drive by there, it's amazing the progress that they've made. They're still looking at a November 2nd walkthrough, and I think that will go very, very positively. So that's, as I said, good news. One of the items you see, parking deck, there's still one outstanding item we've got to work out with Winter, and we're addressing that in a couple of different ways. It's just a contract issue where we need to get on the same page. Everything else, you notice the progress that's going on by Dickerson on the trail, as well as all of the stormwater work. They've been very lucky to have good weather, and they've made an awful lot of progress. I mean, they're saying, I don't think there's any way they're done by December, but they're saying that that's a possibility. Everything else, as I said, is moving forward. Blake and Bill Camp are working on documents along with Tony and Chuck. We're going to discuss some updated budget numbers, I hope this week, from Michael Kidd. I did send out some preliminary numbers, I think, as an attachment with the update, so you kind of have an idea of what we're looking at dollar-wise. I think he's trying to drill down and come up with better numbers there. GWR, there's a meeting Friday afternoon to go over the bid documents and also talk about, there's a lift station down on the RCG property, and they have plans for a gravity line to eliminate that lift station, and I think there'll be a review of those plans also. So overall, I think you'll hear some good news from Tony tonight on the documents, and as far as the project is going, I think it's going pretty well. And there's not, I'm gonna look at this list over the next couple of weeks and add a few things onto here to kind of, because we've done a good job in finishing things. So a couple more are going to come off this week, and we'll look at what we can put on here new. The one thing I did want to mention, I think you got my email about the historic oak tree out at Wisteria Plaza. DOT has definitely determined it is in a very dangerous state for anyone to be traveling by, and we are going to be very clear with the public that it is a GDOT, it's GDOT property, it's a GDOT decision, and they're the ones who will be taking it down. Brian is going to be working closely with them on that. We'll control that narrative there, so we aren't blamed for taking down that tree. So that's kind of all I have.
Can we have Brian coordinate with the Snellville Historic Society so they can?
They're working on some background now. So.
And did we decide did we find out if we can reclaim any of that wood for whatever? It's going to have to get so hollow inside. I'm not sure what we can use.
Well, some of the branches
coming off
are pretty good size.
Yeah.
Pretty good size.
They can make some benches or some skateboards for Tony. Something.
It'd be nice to do something with it if we could.
And
I think that would ease the pain for the public. Maybe.
Yeah, and we have the storage lot down in the old Public Works yard down in the park, so we have space to potentially store stuff as it comes down.
We'll work with them and see what we can get. We'll
even if we end up giving it away as firewood.
Yeah.
I mean.
Well, in the past, we had high winds come through where I've worked before. It knocked down a lot of 200-300-year-old cedar trees, and we made pins out of them. And we gave them to the volunteers when they were coming off boards, made out of the cedar wood from a historic cemetery. So there's something we can do there.
I think we'll have enough oak to last us 1,000 years worth of pins.
Yeah. If you're whittling away.
Yeah, I've got a really nice pen that's made from wood from the USS Constitution. We could do the same thing with it.
Yeah,
Not
that would
cheapy
be-
stuff, really nice stuff.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Then we could use a local craftsman.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could take a little emblem and stick it on it so that you know where it came from.
Okay, any questions for Butch?
Would it be possible in our agendas to have a page of live links, like up by where our business meeting agenda is, or to place them on the agenda, because there are a lot of, particularly with zoning, and I know it's a real
Well, we discussed, I think that's what we discussed just a second, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a nightmare during a meeting or during a work session trying to jump around to the 11-7 different places I have to go and then trying to keep track. So it's either I've got to go back to having you all print out a ream of paper for every meeting, which I detest, or we've got to come up with maybe
It's
embedded links.
more than one step.
Yeah, and maybe it's as easy as scanning them in as PDFs and setting up one of those mini web addresses like BRX71. When you're clicking on a document elsewhere, they're able to give temporary or very short address web addresses that are basically disposable, rather than having to go back to our archaic system. And I know we're going to update it, but I think it would benefit us all, and it would probably benefit the citizens as they try to figure out where we are.
Okay.
This,
And we also talked about a hard copy for a couple of items.
yeah, this
Yeah.
came up, and Todd and I were talking about it this afternoon, and wanted to get y'all's thoughts on what's helpful to me when we've got a rezoning before us is the staff and planning commission report, and then the chart of the conditions and variances that they put together. That's the staff recommendations and then the commission recommendations. What else did I say?
Site maps.
Small site plan?
Yeah, just the small site plan. If we could have those as PDFs, just included in our work set, in our agenda package.
Oh,
You want
and
hard copies
conditions.
though, right?
I'm sorry, what?
You said PDFs, but do you want hard copies?
No.
No, not, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't have to be printed.
Links are
If
fine.
it's
If it's in the agenda package,
in our agenda package, rather than having to go to a link to go out to the web to get to it and come back.
Oh, so you want it like as one combined PDF that we give in the agenda item summary perhaps?
yes.
Okay.
That's no issue.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be the whole packet. It doesn't have to be.
We'll figure out what you guys, I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, you really just want the staff report, a site plan and conditions.
Yes.
As
Pretty much.
one link that you can find.
Because those are the things that we would need to refer to in the meeting most
Instead
often.
of going off-site.
Exactly, because when you're in a meeting, you can't do that,
Hard to
because
maneuver.
our links go to the zoning page, and then you have to scroll down and find it, and then if you click on something, when you go back to it, you've got to go back and scroll back down again, and you just can't do that while people are talking.
And the applications and stuff we don't really need.
No, just a meet.
Right, all that extra stuff we can have reviewed before and
I got you.
deal with that.
Sounds good.
I don't think
Just the meat, no soup.
Yep.
No soup for you.
No dessert.
No, we're gonna have dessert.
Don't start talking ugly like that.
Okay, now we have item B, site plan declaration exhibit. This was in your work, in your package.
Yes.
Did you want to talk about it?
I'll
or
be
you want
glad
me-
to. I'll be glad to. So,
No,
Sure.
I've looked at it a good bit, yeah.
Nice and colored.
so we have structures that are what are called inside the declarations, private streets, named after Mr. Snell and
Mr. Clower.
No.
Sawyer.
Mr. Sawyer. So they're privately owned streets, which the city is investing money in. So our first issue was we need to have an ownership interest in that. And the proposal is to make it a right-of-way street. that would revert back to them if we stopped using the park or stopped using the street. So we get a full road ownership interest, which includes the parking, and then the declaration describes these colored events in the parking area. And so the on-street parking, which is blue, is public parking. That is clearly open to everybody as public parking. It's on Wisteria and Oak and North. The next one is what's shown on mine. I think it's got a different definition of yours. On mine, the original, it said private streets. It was like it was a private parking, the yellow. That was not what I think council intended, and so the question becomes, how do we open that back up to be unrestricted, open to anybody that's parking? And we end up in a word, a little bit of a word. If we call it public parking, then I think the concept there was the concern that other businesses that are not part of the Grove, the town center in the Grove, would then be free to just come park all their cars over there and then walk to work. And that was not what was intended. So it was to give it another definition where if it's a citizen using the park, it would be unrestricted parking, meaning it is restricted to be for people who are using, including the public, the citizens. It would just give it some viability to be unrestricted as the term that we use, so that citizens could use the vast majority of that parking area, which is in yellow. The next group are the purple looking one is multifamily, the pink one is the restaurant, the gray one is the market, and the dark gray one is commercial. So they're,
your colors don't match mine.
I know, but and it doesn't matter. But you can see where there's an angled parking area adjacent to a building, it'll have a sign on it that is restricted to certain times when it would be used by those. And then the third, the proposed compromise coming out of Monday's meeting was that that some of the yellows be marked so that they could be converted into restricted parking or designated parking if those businesses needed more designated parking. And so it gave it a little bit of discretion in a board that you had a substantial amount of influence on making that decision to add to it. And they would be shown on this chart as potential future designated parking. So it's sort of the complexity of what we're doing. We're getting very precise now that we have a plan that is being proposed as to how to use it. So, any questions or concerns? Does that sound? You can see how many there are restricted. All good.
Tony, I'll just add a comment for Mayor and Council's edification. The rear of the library, where you see that orange area, that's the Uber area, and I believe I'm looking at the same map that you are now. If you look at kind of the stair step that's right beside that on the library, that is where the entrance, the service entrance is to the library, not where you see the kind of little two parallel lines where the road is drawn. So that Uber area has moved around a little bit. It's been adjusted for the library entrance, and so this probably needs to be updated to the current kind of design of the library and the service entrance. And just so you're aware, that would move that orange Uber drop-off area around a little bit with some of with that also that public parking on that end, just so when you see one in the future, you'll know what happened.
So it'll probably shift back towards Flower Street.
Todd, I was trying to remember how it shifted because I've seen the plan. And I was on vacation last week, so I don't remember. All
right. Well, as long as it's there, it doesn't matter. It just makes more sense to shift it towards Flower Street, because if the drop-off area in the, well, looks like a yellow P, there where it abuts the Grove. We talked about that also being an Uber Lyft drop-off with a designated address. I think Dave brought that up. It's not marked on here, but if it shifts back towards north, those two get closer together, making them less useful. So if it shifts back towards Clower, it's more useful for the market. And
Yeah, but all of that's going to be driven by where
Yeah.
the library stuff comes from.
yeah, because the drop-off area and the public parking can be interchangeable. I mean, we just have to make sure that the county is okay with it. I'm just stating that I would prefer that it go more towards the, what's that, south?
All I can tell you right now, I'd have to find the plan again, is that if that's all been determined.
Okay.
And so it's just a matter, and the library has signed off on what's been determined.
Okay.
They approved it, so I'll be glad.
I'm good, never mind.
I'll be glad to dig it up and add it to this, but I just wanted you to know that that little area on this map would probably be changing a little bit, so you know what happens when it does change, when you see
Yeah.
it change.
So, why all of this became a little bit of an issue with the yellow being public parking is the developers just want, they are private streets, but they don't intend to just say, oh no, we own these streets and these parking places. They're intending that all of these spaces would be available for whoever comes to the Grove and to the, in that whole area. And because our issue was, well, if we've got them designated as private streets, it sounds like citizens can't park there, and yet we're participating in the maintenance of these private streets for those parking spaces. And really the conversation was, and I talked to Kirk last week, and their concern is that as things happen down here, we don't really know what the issues are gonna be. Once things start getting open, we're just not going to know. And they want to be able to have the leeway to change things around a little bit, or maybe put in some 3-hour restriction time, things like that. And we were anticipating having some kind of association that would make those decisions in the future. Well, Tony's concern is in that association, if the city's a part of it, all of these little kind of questions would have to come back to the city council for a vote, and that gets cumbersome, and we don't want to wind up in that position. So, where is that happy medium place? And so the thought was that we actually let the developers pick off some more of these spaces to be able to say that these can be designated as 3-hour parking or Monday through Friday, whatever. And then they can choose not to put those signs up if they want. And then if it later becomes an issue, they can go back and put the signs up, but it's already in our agreement that they can do that. And they don't have to keep coming back to council to make any kind of adjustments. So that's kind of where we were headed.
And my bigger concern is that they wouldn't have to come back to council at all, and that we would be so watered down inside that organization that it didn't matter what we said, we couldn't control that parking area around the park. That it's really city being able to vote on it is my bigger control issue. Now, it's pretty obvious to me that this is because parking has been off the chart, the discussion. I mean, we are pushing and shoving over parking. And so here's we've got some concerns, but owners of those businesses are going to want the parking places closest to their businesses to be open. So they're going to park in your parking deck, and all their employees are going to park in your parking deck. So your parking deck is going to get sort of full of people who want those parking places open. And so it's a push and shove, and the control on that is for council to compel everybody who builds near this town center to have adequate parking. And that's a control that developer, our private partner, has to understand that we can control that, and we have to understand that we have to maintain those controls of adequate parking in order to make sure that the design works the way it's supposed to. So that's a little trust factor that becomes but when it comes to, okay, the yellow ones are unrestricted public, in that anybody coming to be at the park can park in there, and we've agreed, you know, that becomes fixed. So nobody can put a sign on those and say you can't park here if you're coming to use the park or the library or the market. It's a first come, first served then for those spaces. So, now there are other things that we can do to control parking if somebody were coming out of an adjacent business and letting their employees park there. We have other controls. Developer doesn't have that, so he's got to trust us to maintain those controls too. So. But it's just keeping the city in the position to be a decision maker on if any of that changes and in the future is a key ingredient. So.
Okay. All right. So y'all are okay with where we're headed there? Okay, so that will end well, it won't end the work session. We're going to do we have enough time to do the exec session now?
Get started.
Yes, we can. We can get started.
We're going to get started. All right, during the work session of the Mayor and City Council of Snellville, Georgia, Mayor Bender announced that certain matters should be discussed in a closed session of the meeting and asked council to advise the city with respect to closing the meeting. City Attorney Tony Powell advised the city of the following reasons to close the meeting. What are we doing? Is it just real estate?
It's real estate and potential litigation.
To discuss pending and/or potential litigation, settlement claims, administrative proceedings, or other judicial actions which is exempt from the Open Meetings Act pursuant to OCGA Section 50-14-2-1. To authorize negotiations to purchase, dispose,